Hello everyone, Ace here, and today I'm just going to have to go ahead and say it. Paper Mario the Origami King is now apparently pro-imperialist propaganda. And if you're sat there thinking that this is sounding ridiculous, well, you would be absolutely correct. However, it is also the latest hot take provided to us by Paste Magazine's review of the game, which is simply titled, Paper Mario the Origami King is Unambitious Problematic Fun by Waverly. Now, if you're wondering how this particular journalist came up with the conclusion that Paper Mario the Origami King is actually pro-imperialist propaganda, we'll actually have to skip down to the 12th paragraph, which reads, and I quote, "This reveals the limited ambition of Origami King, and Nintendo as a corporate game company at that. Historically, there is a standard of corporate design meant to adhere to a limited audience and alienate the rest. Video games are saturated with decades of colonial masculine military violence and foster a dominant culture of design through its standards. Despite the charm and fun that is in Origami King, it can't imagine game design outside the realm that corporate game development has engendered. Unfortunately, this means there are implicit harmful politics within the game because it upholds these values." Okay, so there are actually two very specific issues that I have with this particular paragraph. The first being that the notion that AAA publishers are trying to cater to a limited audience is complete and absolute nonsense. In fact, it so thoroughly misses the mark that one of the big issues with most AAA publishers is the exact opposite, as many major publishers have been so thoroughly obsessed with making their games accessible that they've often ended up taking out the very things that made those specific franchises interesting to begin with. In fact, I myself even created a video years ago discussing this specific topic, which I will of course be leaving a link to in the description below. But regardless, the simple reality is that the claim that modern AAA publishers are trying to cater to a very specific and limited audience is simply and demonstrably untrue. But moving on to my second issue with this particular paragraph, it's the fact that this particular journalist seems to believe that these major corporations are in the business of making video games in order to push the so-called moral values of a capitalist system. And to counter this claim, I have to point out the simple fact that capitalism is not, nor has it ever claimed to be, a moral system in any way. The closest you could get to that is the fact that capitalism is a pragmatic economic system, but it is still strictly an economic system and not in any way a moral system. But nevertheless, merely pointing that out alone is simply ignoring the fact that the journalist in question is attempting to perceive Paper Mario as a propaganda piece, regardless of whether or not Paper Mario actually is a propaganda piece. And spoiler alert, it isn't. Because the closest thing to actual evidence that this particular journalist provides to make their claim is the fact that you gain new abilities by entering dungeons and battling bosses. And really think about the implications for that for a moment, because let's compare this to other games, such as for example Skyrim. Imagine for example getting a quest to go into a cave and fight off waves of bandits in order to retrieve some high-grade loot that they stole from someone else, because apparently that is enough to get your game labeled as pro-imperialist propaganda these days. This is a classic example of the fundamental flaw behind thinking that everything is political, because it always results in extreme and absurd claims that simply do not hold up under the slightest bit of scrutiny. And while I wish that was the only absurd claim that this particular journalist made, that is simply not the case, as she also decided to delve into the treatment of Princess Peach in this game, complaining about the fact that she even becomes a centerpiece on the villain's wall, with the usual accusation of objectification in tow. What is, however, ironic to this particular claim, and also debunks it by the way, is the fact that Mario himself had something very similar happen to him before as well, such as being put into a painting in Luigi's mansion, making him also a centerpiece within the particular room that he was housed. In other words, this particular journalist seems to believe that turning Mario into a painting is alright, but doing something similar to Peach is simply unacceptable. Now, as ridiculous as this all sounds, and for very good reason mind you, I would nevertheless have to say that the next paragraph in particular is where we truly get to see just how deluded this particular activist actually is, as they then claim that the nice looking graphics of the game constantly results in them thinking about the political messages within the game that they find so unappealing, ending this particular paragraph with, and I quote, "The high fidelity of the game only reminds me what the cultural standard of video games are today." Really think about this for a moment, because what they've said here is that because they think the game looks nice, they must now view it as propaganda. That is such an insane statement for this particular journalist to make that I've never actually seen anyone make that argument before, and I've personally been covering these types of smear pieces for years now. But it does definitely demonstrate that the activists that are pretending to be game journalists are becoming more and more unhinged. And one really does have to wonder how much longer this can continue before the entire industry of video game journalism finally collapses under its own weight. Now, there's not really much more to say about this article, but I will of course be providing an archive link in the description below in case you wish to read it yourself. In any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.